How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Today's episode is an extra special one. For the very first time in our Culture Architects history, we're actually joined by not just one person, but we've got two guests today. It's a father and son tandem of Marc and Brian Blaushild, and they're the current leaders of an Ohio-based Famous Supply. Famous Supply is a fourth-generation family business. They've been around for over 90 years, believe it or not. It's an award-winning regional wholesale distributor of HVAC, plumbing, industrial, and building products. Marc has served as Famous' president and CEO since 2004, but just earlier this year, back around January, he transitioned to the position of chairman and CEO, and he named his son Brian, who we have with us, as the president. So we're excited to have both of them take us through their company's culture building process, their 40 fundamentals, and what they call the Famous Way. So Brian and Marc, welcome to the Culture Architects podcast.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Oh, great to have you. So, being a family business is obviously different from many other. And so for our listeners, just to get some sense of Famous, maybe Marc, if you could start with perhaps a little bit of a history of the company. So I know it was your grandfather that started the company, right?
Sure. Yes. Hyman Blaushild, my grandfather, came over as an immigrant in 1922 to America. He really didn't speak much English, couldn't read, but he had the work ethic. He was what they called a tin man, sheet metal contractor, and he was installing furnaces and trying to provide heat for those in the community. And then over time, he wasn't getting as good service out of his wholesalers. He started bringing in some additional inventory, and a lot of his contractor friends were coming to him more so than other wholesalers in town. He decided to stop being a contractor, became a wholesaler, and that's how we started on Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio in 1933.
Wow. And then so it went from your grandfather to your father, Jay, who I remember meeting. And so when did Jay take over as president?
So my father actually was born in 1933, and he was, working in the warehouse as a teenager. And then after college, he joined in the 1950s. And my father, we like to say, had as much or more passion, not only than anybody in our company, but you could go around the country or the planet, and it'd be difficult to find somebody like my father that just loved building the company. And it was really all about the people. It was all about the people and the development of that. And we really expanded during his time. And he took over officially in 1970 when my grandfather passed away.
And so as you were growing up as a child, was it always your expectation that you were going to join the family business, or was that something that later you decided, but I'm never going to do that? Or was that always something you thought you were going to do?
It was actually a little bit later. My parents were divorced when I was about 5, and I moved to California with my mom and stepfather and brother when I was 11. So I lived there, grew up, and I loved it out there. I used to come back in the summers, and I was planning to go back my senior year of high school. And got a phone call that my mom and my stepdad were getting separated, and I stayed in Cleveland with my dad that senior year of high school. And because of that, I went to Ohio State, met my wife there, and therefore she was from Cleveland. We decided to stay in Cleveland. It was just a very innocuous conversation with my dad right at, as I was graduating, and said, "Do you want to come to Famous?" And I said, "Sure." And it really was about that simple, and went to one of our companies, a division we had, learned wholesale distribution, started in the warehouse and moved up from there into every role pretty much in the company. And that's how I kind of cut my teeth in the industry, similar to Brian in many respects.
Well, so let's go to Brian. Brian, so did you always expect that someday you were going to work at Famous, or was that not something you necessarily wanted to do?
To be honest, kind of similar to my dad, it wasn't something that I really thought of. I always worked as a kid. I mean, I worked at McDonald's. I was a daycare or day camp counselor, babysat, did so many different odd jobs. And I think when I got to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I went to school for accounting and finance, did an internship in accounting, and was kind of debating if I wanted to go into banking or accounting, and I just thought about it and decided to make the move to Famous.
Uh-huh. Now, a lot of people, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have been involved in discussions with lots of other multi-generational family businesses because they tend to be unique. And it's interesting that, when I read about and see, and I've worked with so many of them, but very few family businesses make it past the second generation. That typically it's around the third generation that things fall apart. So what do you think has enabled Famous to so successfully get to a fourth generation? And either of you jump in.
Go ahead, Brian.
I guess I could take this one. So one of the things we're very open book and transparent with our associates. I mean, we share financials, and as much as we can share, we try to share. And one thing that we're very proud of is that in 91 years, no one in our family has ever taken a dividend. 100% of our profits are reinvested in the business. And,
Wow.
I think there's a lot of businesses where they do very well financially and the owners get, a monetary reward. And, to some degree, making sure that our business is sustainable supersedes that. It's the most important thing. And it's not for us, it's for our people. And we want anybody that works at Famous to know that, we're in this for the long haul. And even today's age, so many companies are doing layoffs or letting people go. And a lot of people don't have confidence that their employer's going to be around for a while. And we want our people to realize that we're going to do whatever we can to make Famous sustainable for hopefully another 90 years. And I think a lot of it stems with the fact that we continue to reinvest in the business.
That's an impressive position to hold. Marc, is that something that your father or grandfather always said, hey, this is really important? Or where did that commitment come from?
It was really in our DNA. And if I would have taken that answer, what Brian said was so perfect, because that's really the essence. We have the ability to do that. I would also say that one of my dad's favorite stories is when he used to go to a branch, and he'd go to Wheeling, West Virginia, or he'd go over to Steubenville, Ohio, or down to, anywhere, Fremont, any of our branches around where we were. And when he'd walk in, and many times the manager would introduce him, this is Jay Blaushild, the owner. If he didn't know that particular customer over the years, my dad knew thousands of our customers. But whenever he was introduced, he often had people, they looked at him and said to the customer said to the manager, I thought you were the owner of Famous Supply. Because, back then it wasn't, as integrated in computer systems. Obviously it was just, and my dad loved that when people didn't even know that he owned the company, and, that they thought that the branch, that manager, it was his store, if you will. And I think that permeated in the organization. There was so much passion for the business that people ran it like it was theirs, and they care about it even more than we did. My father would joke, and I have this, I've never had a key to one of our buildings. I don't think Brian does either. And there's a lot of trust with our people, and they truly are our associates. We say, not employees, our associates care about the company so much, and they care about our customers. And I think that permeates through and has helped us be sustainable, where I think other companies maybe have, fallen by the wayside or sold out.
Yeah. So Brian was saying that you're up to 960 associates you have. And how many different locations are there among all these different branches?
I think 50, 53, 54, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so for the benefit of our audience, and in full disclosure, Marc and Brian practice the fundamentals that we talk about often. And it was back in 2015 that I met Marc, and we began on that journey. So Marc, tell me a little bit about, and for our audience sake, so why did you choose to do this?
Well,
this being working on your fundamentals.
Sure. I mean, we always knew we had a culture. I mean, every company has a culture, whether it's in writing or not, if you will, or if they have a program around it. You have a culture, some good or some not so good. So we always felt our culture was pretty good. I was in a business group, and Brian was in it as well, called Vistage. And David, you know, you were a speaker at one of those. We used to have maybe 6 speakers a year, and I was in it for 10 years. So I've seen about 60 speakers. And we've only hired, I think, 2, and you were one of the 2. But before we hired David, when I saw him present, I said to myself, I really feel that this is one of the most important presentations I've heard out of all the, not only those speakers, but, in my career. And in the beginning, we kind of tried to do some things on our own and we weren't getting much traction. And then we called you, David, as you remember. And then it really, within 2 weeks, we had drafts going. And then 2 weeks, we had a semblance of the program. And then we firmed it up, a few weeks after that. And we rolled it out at the time to 650 people, 18 different sessions. I was at every one.
I remember that.
We were there and Brian was there. I mean, our whole team was there. And it was really one of the best things. And I would not say this if it wasn't true. I think it was one of the best things we've ever done in the history of our company. I'd put it up there. If we didn't have a computer system, we probably wouldn't be in business. If we didn't have a, distribution logistics system like we do, and it would be tough to operate. But, there's only those handful of things, and focusing intently and purposefully on our culture, it has been a key to our, success.
I remember, Mark, when we had rolled out those fundamentals and you made the comment that, we did 18, 20 meetings, whatever it was, and you were in every one of those. And from my perspective, at least, that was a very powerful statement you made by your physical presence. I mean, that's a lot. It's candidly, it's boring to do 18 meetings. I don't know. And we did them day after day over several weeks, I remember. And, you being there in every one, I think sent a message to your organization. This is important to us. And this would perhaps surprise you because of the way you and Brian think. But, we have clients we work with where, the CEO isn't in all those meetings. And you wonder what message that really sends to people about how big of a priority is this?
Yeah.
Is this a big deal or not?
I mean, it was a beautiful setup. We had about roughly, 40 people or so at each of those meetings. And the reason I thought each one was unique in a sense is that even though the message was the same and the program was the same, and a lot of what we said, you or anything I interjected or others was the same, the audience was different. It was 40 different people. Mm-hmm. Some who had been with us 30, 40, 50 years or more, some that it might have been their first or second week or third month on the job. So getting everybody in the room, and the way you broke everybody into those groups, when we break to the breakout groups of 3 people in the sessions and they were interactive, for us to be able to see our people interact and or interact with them was really the key, because you saw it coming to life. And if we were, just even on the other side of the wall sitting in our office, we wouldn't be able to be part of that. And we learned a lot about our people, and hopefully they learned, a lot about us as well.
Yeah. Now, I will say that, and I think you know this, so Famous Enterprises has 40 fundamentals that they call their famous way. And I'm always asked with every client and every talk that I do, so how many fundamentals should we have? And I always tell them that the least number I've ever seen is 18 and the most I've ever seen is 40. And I normally would not recommend to people that they have 40 fundamentals, but you have done it. You were determined you were not going to let go of any of those because they work for you. And you certainly have been fabulously successful with it. So maybe Brian, Mike, could you share some of the things for our audience? So what do you do every week around your fundamentals? How do you practice the fundamentals?
So I think the biggest change for me was seeing how they're brought up just in everyday conversation. And what we do is, the thing that's repetitive is every Sunday night we send out a video. It's normally about 90 seconds where we film one individual talking about the fundamental and sharing a story about what it means to them. And it just doesn't stop there. And, I know we want to talk about them at the beginning of every meeting, and it happens. I'm not saying it happens 100% of every meeting. We do okay. But where it really stands out is when people are having conversations and using it in a coachable manner and talking about how someone did a really good job at that fundamental, or maybe they didn't in a specific one. And I think people use them. I mean, it's 10, 15 times a day you hear a fundamental being mentioned.
Yeah. And it starts to become your vocabulary, your language, the way you think about things.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, going back to the family business angle, in what ways do you think it's easier, and in what ways do you think it's harder for either of you with this being a family business? What ways do you think that's an easier thing as a family, or does that put more stress or challenge on you?
I think it could cut both ways, but for us, I do think it's easier. And I think one of the reasons why is because I think a lot of the fundamentals are kind of core values that our family believes in. And the
Mhm.
first one, do the right thing always. That's important. I mean, we make decisions every single day that might not make the most sense financially, but it's the right thing to do for an associate or associate's family member because, it's just the right thing to do. Maybe it's somebody that, they work for us and they're out of vacation, but they have a spouse that is sick, and we just do the right thing and let them work, you know, as needed. And those are the type of things where, as long as that's our guiding principle, I think our associates realize that, it's not only the fundamental for our company, it's what me and my dad believe in. And I think people see that and it resonates with them. And it's very important for us.
Yeah. What ways do you think practicing fundamentals in your culture, famous, in what ways do you think, or have you heard stories of how it's impacted people in their personal lives? Are they different fathers, sons, daughters, wives, husbands?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll give you one. 10 minutes ago, I
Uh,
was walking
yeah.
downstairs and I met somebody who she just started at Famous a couple weeks ago, and I never really spent much time with her. She came up and introduced herself and we were talking, and she was telling me where she worked prior. And I said, what's the biggest difference between when you worked there and when you worked, started at Famous? And she said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but
Mhm.
she goes, it wasn't until I started working at Famous that I realized that the company was holding me hostage against my will, her last
Mm,
company.
mm,
Like the hours she was working in the evening, she was just kind of paraphrasing. And she was like, it wasn't until I got here that I realized how bad I had it there. And that made
mm.
me feel really good because that's someone that they got their personal life back. They have their family time, their time with their friends. And those are the type of things that make me feel incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times when someone joins our company, obviously the people that are here that are part of it, they love it. But the people that join our company, if we would say, what's one of the reasons, you either sought out Famous, or I'll ask a question, how'd you find Famous or how did we find you? And sometimes it's a referral and that, but most often not. And I would say 80, 90% or more, 8 or 9 out of 10, the reason they're saying it's the fundamentals. They'll
Mm,
say, I was on your website and I was watching the videos, or I was watching, you know, this or that. And, we put that on, out there transparently, for the world to see, or anybody. And it's amazing how many people, that's the reason they want to talk with us. I was doing an interview of somebody yesterday, that's going from the service into the private sector. He has a 3 and a 4 year old, two sons, and that's what he was talking about. It was the
mhm,
fundamentals and being able to want to be, where he can be there for his family in this next chapter of his life.
mm. So, given how distributed your workforce is, I mean, it's certainly doing culture is relatively easier when you've got one location. You got 20 people, 50 people in one location, but with, you know, 960 associates and 50 some locations, how do you keep the consistency of your culture?
In our, we all do, various functional leaders, we do onboarding, and I do it's about an hour session or 50 minutes. And I did it yesterday actually for a group. And in one of my slides, I asked, it's a question, who owns our culture? And then when you click on it, it says, I do,
Hmm.
you do, we all do. And I'll say to them, okay, we're here right now. I say our biggest challenge is getting in alignment with that because of what you just brought up, being spread
Hmm.
out. I said, I can't affect the culture. I said, think about today. There's things happening in the branch, maybe where you're sitting, you're in a different room right now, or there's things happening in our company that we observe or see, but we don't always see it. You see it on a day-to-day basis. So we rely on our people to be the the part of building and creating and developing the culture. And if they see somebody doing something that it's really really good, it kind of accentuates one of our fundamentals. We want them to recognize those people and appreciate them and thank them for, hey, I saw how you saw it, you owned it, you did it, and congratulate them for that, or you were really in the gray zone here, you were really humble with that situation. We want to recognize, but if they see things that aren't the way it should be, we want somebody to privately pull somebody to the side and say, I know you've been here just a few months, but that situation came up, and we handle it this way, and here's why. And that's how we do it here at our culture. So when we say those 50 locations, which we want to grow it to about 100 locations from, say, 53 in the next 10 years for 100, that's kind of an aspirational 100 locations at a 100-year anniversary. If that happens, it's going to be more of an issue, or more of a challenge, I should say.
Yeah.
So we're going to need our people to help that every single day, every day, every moment of every day.
And Brian, what do you think is from your perspective now, taking over as president, what do you think is the biggest challenge to your culture? Where are you at risk about culture, do you think?
I hate to say I don't see it as a risk, because it's because it's the most important priority of our company. It's something we're not going to fail at. I mean, we hire and fire based on culture. We are not bringing on leaders that don't fit our culture. And if culture was the third or fourth or fifth biggest, most important thing in our company, then I could see how growing would make it a challenge. But because it's the number one thing that we talk about every single day, it's our people, and do they exhibit our fundamentals. It's just something that I think we're going to be successful at. Obviously, anytime you're rapidly growing and trying to hire a ton of people, you have to figure out a way to make sure that you're not bringing on people that don't fit your culture. But it's so ingrained in our people throughout the hiring process that it's just a non-negotiable for us.
Yeah. And I was kind of going to go where Brian was going there. I would say that challenge would be if we don't get the hiring up front right. Like for every 10 people you hire, your goal is that 10 really fit that culture. But it's, you're not always going to be perfect there.
Sure.
So if you were at 9 out of 10 versus 8 out of 10 or 4 out of 10, if you weren't getting it right, and that's why we do include a lot of people in the interview process, and we're not perfect, but it's a challenge.
Yeah. And it's also making sure that if we find somebody and we hire them for a leadership role, and after 2, 3, 4 weeks, we realize, this was not the right person, it's making a decision quickly. Maybe it's moving them to an individual contributor role, or moving them out of leadership, or maybe even out of the company. But before that, you're going to do whatever you can to try to turn it around. But if we know someone long-term is not going to be a cultural fit, if they're in a leadership role, you have to make a change quickly.
Yeah. And what I hear in that straight from you, Brian, is just that commitment. There's such a powerful commitment that comes through from you about what a priority this is. So I'm, obviously I talk to lots and lots of people every week, every month about culture. And sometimes there's a tendency for people to wonder about or even question, yes, that's great. We want all our people to feel good. That's all nice. But does this really affect the bottom line? Is this a financial thing? And so I'm curious, from your perspective, you have such a, you said, Brian, it's a number one priority. How would you answer somebody that says, come on, give me a break? Does that really affect the bottom line? What would you say?
Yeah. So our industry is, we're selling knowledge and expertise. We're a distributor. So every product we sell, for the most part, people can buy the exact same product at a different distributor, or a very comparable product. So they come to us because of our knowledge and our expertise. And a lot of that is, how long people have worked for us. Some of our best people have been here 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And if people don't like the culture and they leave, you're going to lose a lot of great people. So our goal, and, John Palermo, who's our VP of sales, who's been here for 46 years, he tells people during the hiring process, my intention is, if you join Famous, for you to retire here. And we really want to make Famous such a great place that people never want to leave. And that's a huge competitive advantage when you have all that knowledge and experience, and it just keeps building and perpetuating year over year. And that's the goal, is to get people to stay forever.
Wow. What would you add to that, Marc?
Well, there's no question what Brian said. I agree with 100%. And I think it is that is important and a key to our success, but we still have to get the results. So someone could fit the culture. They could live a lot of fundamentals, a lot of them, but if they aren't performing at the level, that can be an issue, whether they're in a leadership or contributing roles. So that's where then training and development and other coaching comes into play to try to get people to perform at the highest level possible. So, culture, like Brian said, it's everything for us. It's the foundation. But yes, we do have to it can't be all touchy-feely, right? I mean, we have to do well. And I think our people, therefore, help us get the people that fit our culture into roles where they really are contributing.
Yeah, and what I would add to what you've said as I listen is that if we think of culture as just a bunch of touchy-feely stuff and performance as something different, then there's a conflict there because, okay, well, yes, they fit our culture, but we also need them to perform. I would say if your culture is a performance culture, well, then if they're not performing, they don't fit your culture.
That's right.
So ultimately, a big part of your culture is delivering results and getting it done.
Exactly.
So somebody that doesn't perform wouldn't be a fit in your culture.
It's well said.
And that concludes the first half of my conversation with Marc and Brian Blaushild, the current leaders of Famous Supply, a fourth-generation family business with more than 900 team members. In the second part of our interview, we're in for a fascinating discussion about transparency and trust, and how the leaders make these work in a fast-growing, multi-generational business like Famous. All this and more in the next episode, so stay tuned.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.